What is up, YouTube? So as you can tell, it's getting hot out there. So I reached out to my buddy Thomas Skelton with Merge Multisport, and we talked about best ways to train in the heat. So have a listen, let me know what you think, leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe, all those cool things they do on YouTube. All right, enjoy the video. Coach Thomas, how's it going?
Good, bud. How you doing?
Good, good. Hey, wanted to reach out to you and talk to you about this heat we're having right now and get your perspective on what's the best way to train. I mean, I'm dying here every day, like running, I know supposed to bring water, things like that. So I want to get your perspective because you live in Greenville and it's like 1,000,000 degrees there every day, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
I want to get your perspective on how to train in the heat for these summer months. So
Yeah,
tell me what you think.
for sure. I mean, I think bef- there's a lot to kind of consider, and I think as athletes, it's best to kind of have an understanding of kind of what the heat does and why it makes it a challenge, so that we kind of have a better idea of why we need to do some of the different things that we do, so that we can make training in the heat more bearable, if that's cool. Um, so I guess first and foremost, the kind of heat we experience here versus the kind of heat that people experience in less humid environments is completely different too, right? We've got to keep that into consideration. So if you're somebody watching this who happens to be somewhere that's really dry and doesn't have any kind of humidity, and that's going to be one thing. Where if you're somebody like us who lives in the southeast, where it could be 80 degrees and 98% humidity and sunny, and the sweat's just not going to evaporate off of you at all. That's totally different than the dry environment, right? So I think it's important to understand kind of the environment that you're in and that you're training in, right? So before we kind of dive into some things you can do, right, I think we need to kind of understand what is happening to the body, right, when we're training in the heat. So first and foremost, I think we got to recognize that if you were to just go and stand outside when you haven't been outside in the heat a lot, right? It's 95 degrees. You feel the sun beating down on your skin. You feel the heat coming up off the ground, and you just generally feel that warmth. You walk outside and you go, oh man, it's warm, right? So your body is going to immediately start trying to maintain kind of an optimal core environment, right? Your heart rate's going to start going up. You're going to start sweating, and these are all in an effort to start cooling your body, right? So that you can maintain kind of an ideal internal environment for taking care of your organs, right? That's what our bodies, everything our body does really is geared towards survival, right? So the things that make running in that heat challenging are the things that your body's doing to try and help keep you alive. Okay, so first off, that the stress from the sun, the stress of that heat, the heart rate going up, the sweating, these are all things that again, like I said, our body is trying to do to help keep it cool. Now there are things that we can do just via kind of trying to acclimate over time to make those stresses less impactful on our body and allow us to be able to train in that environment a little bit more. So without kind of diving down in too much into like heat acclimation protocols, the biggest thing I think we need to understand is that it's gonna be hot. It's going to make it feel harder than it is when it's cooler outside. So you got to slow down, right? First thing you've got to do is just at the end of the day and at the start of the day, you got to check your ego, right? Let's say you've got that 8-mile loop you do when it's 50 degrees outside and you run it at an 8-minute pace, and then it finally gets hot. Summer jumps up kind of quick, like it always kind of seems to do early on, and now all of a sudden you can't run it at an 8:30 or 8:40 pace, right? And at 8:30 or 8:40 pace, your heart rate is 10 beats higher than it was at your 8-minute pace. And so you're looking at that and you're like, I'm not running as fast and my heart rate's really high. I've lost my fitness. What's happened, right? And it's just the heat. So the first thing I think you've got to do is slow that pace down and honestly just throw any pace thoughts that you have out the window, right? You've experienced that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
You
it almost takes you by surprise because you're like out running 7:30s or 7 minutes or 8-minute pace, and everything is easy at like a 120 heart rate. And then that first hot day, you're like, wow, this is so much harder. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And you come back and you have that first day where, and honestly, maybe it wasn't even that hot, right? Maybe it was 70 degrees, but it was ridiculously humid for us. And you come back and you're like, man, I ran really slow. My effort felt really high. My heart rate was really high, and my clothes are saturated, right? So absolutely slowing it down is definitely the first thing we've got to do. And recognize that slowing down is going to give our body a better chance to keep ourselves cooler, right? So that's first and foremost. I do like heart rate monitors. Most athletes don't, because they see the higher heart rate and they see how slow they have to run to kind of keep things in an appropriate zone or keep things in check, and their ego won't let them do that initially, until I fuss with them enough. Then we get there. So yeah. Well, I mean, right? Like, it's we don't want to think about it. Like, your legs get used to running a certain pace, and that heart rate monitor is giving us just black and white concrete data that our body is working harder, right? And so it gives us that feedback to say, hey, we're working harder than we're supposed to. Let's back off. So, and I think we have to also recognize that getting used to the heat takes time, right? So it's, if you say, hey, it's gotten hot, I'm ready to get used to it, I'm going to go out, 7 days a week for an hour a day, my hour bike, my hour run, whatever it is, and I'm going to be out in the heat. It's just going to be too much. Trying to pick 2 or 3 sessions and keeping your other sessions cooled and indoors, right? So you've got those little bit doses, and then you have a chance to kind of properly rehydrate and get ready for subsequent sessions. And then as you get used to it over a week or 2 or 3, we can continue having more and more and more sessions outside until you've become comfortable enough to where, or your body's had that chance to acclimate so that you can spend more of your time outside, right? I think then the next thing that I tend to ask all my athletes to do is, when it's just starting to get hot, kind of trying to check in and get an idea of our sweat rate. And then 2 or 3 weeks or a month or 6 weeks after it's been hot, kind of check in and try and get an idea of our sweat rate, right? Initially, when we first get out there and it's hot, one of the adaptations that we're going to make to heat is sweating more, which is it's a great thing, because sweating helps us cool, unless it's super humid and that sweat's just going to stay on our body and doesn't get to evaporate, right? Because it's the evaporation that helps us, that really kind of helps cool our body. With us, it just lays on us like a blanket. You don't really get a chance to cool off. But so as we get more comfortable with the heat, we start to sweat sooner, and we start to sweat more. That's more fluid, and that's more electrolytes. The downside to that is that as we sweat more, we're sweating more. We're going to lose more fluids, and we're going to lose more fluids at a more rapid pace. And so we have to replace those fluids at a different pace as well. And that's something that we have to get used to. So I like whether it's a 30-minute or an hour test early on, taking your pre-run or your pre-ride weight, dry, no clothes on is ideal. And then go and work out for an hour, measure the fluids that you consume during that workout, weigh yourself after. The net of what you've lost versus what you've consumed is going to give you an idea of your approximate sweat rate. So let's say somebody sweats, we'll call it to make it easier for us. Let's say it's 500 milliliters an hour, right? Well, we kind of know, okay, this is what I lose. We can kind of dive into what it takes to replace that. But then 6-8 weeks down the road of being out in the heat, training regularly, getting used to it, maybe now we're sweating 750 ml per hour, right? Which is not a huge difference over the course of an hour. But for us, I mean, how often are your races just an hour?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so let's say you think you go out there with the idea that, well, I'm sweating 500 ml an hour, but you're actually sweating 250 ml an hour, and you're training for 5 hours, right? You've lost 1,250 more ml than you were accounting for. So when you're kind of trying to plan your hydration and nutrition strategy. So that's why I like the idea of doing that initial so you kind of know where you are, at least off the bat, and then kind of checking in down the road. And obviously, I mean, that test, go out, train for an hour, dry yourself off, and go weigh yourself, get on the scale. It's pretty darn easy to do, right? Someone certainly could go and do some of the different sweat testing to get an idea of their specific electrolyte content, right? I'm a super heavy sweater, or in electrolytes, or I'm not a very heavy sweater, but generally human sweat has certain amounts and certain ratios of electrolytes within a kind of specified range. So you're gonna know that you're somewhere between a certain amount of electrolytes, right, within a range. And if you happen to be that person that says, hey, I see more salt on my skin regularly, or I don't ever have salt on my skin, you kind of know, hey, maybe I'm higher or lower in that range. But then you can work on replacing accordingly, right? The challenge, I'm sorry, I'm going to end up rambling, going off on all kinds of tangents because that's just what I do. I don't work in a straight line. So, this is where as athletes, let's say, you sweat, I don't know, let's call it 40 ounces an hour, right? That's a lot of sweat. It's hard to consume that much fluid an hour, right? Typically 30 to 32 ounces is generally about what most people can consume and actually absorb. So when you start getting to some of these extreme sweat rates, you as an athlete, and so I personally come into this, and that my sweat rates are ridiculous, and you can only consume so much fluid and electrolytes. So in certain temperatures, at some point, your performance is going to suffer. So you kind of have to take in this information and say, hey, maybe I've got this hard run. I've got a 2-hour run that maybe happens to have, 6 or 7 miles of quality work in it, right? Well, how bad off am I going to be at the end of 2 hours? Can I actually consume everything that I need to in that 2-hour time frame to make sure that I don't finish that workout extremely depleted, right, dehydrated, and then it's going to take so long to refuel and rehydrate from that workout that my subsequent workouts are going to suffer because I'm going to inherently go into them in a compromised state, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of situations where you've got to take all the different factors into consideration. Say, hey, maybe I go and jog, do my warm up on the treadmill, right? So that I'm not sweating as much, go do my quality outside, and then go back and cool back down on the treadmill. Or if it's a quality run, maybe if it's just 60 to 90 minutes, I know people hate running on the treadmill, but maybe you just go and run on the treadmill so that you've got all your fluids right there. It's easier to control. You're not sweating as much. There's a whole ton of factors you got to keep in. Bottom line, slowing down, understanding how much you sweat, and then having a strategy in place to replace an appropriate amount or appropriate proportion of what you're sweating, of what you're losing. So whether that's, making sure you've got a couple different stops on your run or your ride, you're running with a hydration belt. Right now with this temperature, if I've got to run over 45 degrees, I'm not out there running without some sort of a belt or something to make sure I've got stuff with me. And then potentially looking into some different mechanisms to cool yourself, right? Whether that is having a hat that covers your head a little bit, right? Wearing lighter colored clothing that's going to reflect a little bit more of the sunshine, right? Trying to run in more shaded areas, like our Swamp Rabbit Trail here, right? It's a great place to run even when it's hot because there's a large part of it that is shaded, unless it's noon, right? So kind of picking your routes like that accordingly, or running loops near your house and potentially having a cooler, hoping nobody steals it, outside with some ice in there that maybe you've got a 2-mile loop, and sure, maybe it's boring to run a 2-mile loop 2 or 3 or 5 times, but if it allows you to every 2 miles stop, get some ice in your hands, put a little ice in your hat, get a cooling towel around your neck, put some ice down in your crotch, anywhere near some of those bigger arteries that we can try and kind of keep that blood cool. that's something that's worth doing so that the quality of your workouts doesn't suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, it kind of went way all over the place.
So that kind of like 2 mile loop, that strategy, is that kind of what you tell your athletes when they're doing an Ironman and it's a hot race, somewhere like Chattanooga where they come off and the bike is like 95 degrees, is that what you tell your athletes?
Well, so I think you have to get used to the fact that hopefully there's going to be an aid station about every mile, right? So when we train, having that mindset that I am regularly and consistently taking care of myself. Because, right, I mean, we get it. Like, endurance sports are not about being fast. It's about not slowing down, right? And if we are making sure that every mile, maybe we're running those miles slower and we're taking 30 seconds at an aid station to stop and grab some ice and grab that fluid or refill our bottles or whatever it is, right? The compounding effect of taking care of ourselves there is gonna pay off tons, come mile 20 on the run.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, gotta have that in your mind when it comes to training, for sure.
Awesome, man.
Loops are
Awesome.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during the summertime, do you pick a certain time to run, or will you just go out throughout the day and try to run?
So I think early on, when that heat just kind of first pops off, I try and run first thing in the morning when it's dark, right? It's hopefully a little cooler. I know in the mornings here it's more humid, but you kind of fight that battle. It's less humid in the afternoons, but it's hotter, right? So I'll take the humidity with cooler than, I guess, hotter and a little bit less humidity. So first thing in the morning. But as kind of get comfortable and get a little bit used to it, going out and running, maybe once or twice a week when it is hot, if you've kind of gotten comfortable with the temperatures on those morning runs. I mean, what time in a half Ironman, right? What time are you going to get off the bike? If you start at 8:00, right, you're going to get out of the water 8:30. You're going to be off the bike at 10:45. What was it, 11 maybe, right? And so you're running from like 11 to 12:30 or 1:00, right? So the average athlete is running between like starting their run at like noon or 2, somewhere in there. It's going to be hot as can be, right? So kind of having those times where you're out there and once you've started to get used to it and you go, okay, it's hot outside. I'm going to go do an easy 30-minute jog when it's really hot. I'm going to go out prepared, maybe have some, something cold to drink beforehand. And I'm going to have something cold to drink after to be able to kind of cool my body temperature down quickly so that I don't take on too much stress from it. But yeah, getting out on in those hot runs, if it's at noon or 2:00 or 3:00 in the afternoon, I don't think is the worst thing once you've gotten used to it, because it's the kind of environment you're going to have to race in. So I do think you should train in that environment some.
Yeah.
Some.
Awesome, man. What about what kind of workouts do you give your athletes during the summertime for as far as a run or a bike? Considering when you consider the heat,
Yeah. So I think the workouts tend to be dependent upon what races are coming, right? Right now, obviously, there's not a whole lot of races coming. So I tended to keep more quality workouts during the week, whether that's, like a 3 to 5 minute kind of VO2 type workout, or even if it's, 20-minute threshold effort, whatever the quality happens to be that's appropriate for that athlete at the time of the year. I try and, we put those kind of intervals in that work during the week, hopefully indoors on a trainer, right? It's more time efficient. We get to manage our conditions better. It's just all around easier. And then we put, kind of, if somebody wants to go, if we got an easy spin, a little recovery ride, get outside for it, just go cruise, cool. Or a longer, kind of more endurance workouts, sorry, outside. So not a lot of intensity when we're outside, right? At this time of year, just that good bread and butter aerobic kind of work. If we get out and we happen to be kind of in a strength phase for the athlete and they're doing some over gear work, right? Kind of big gear, low cadence, grinding on some of the hills, kind of trying to build that strength. That's not going to generate heat the way, you know, 3 sets of like 16 by 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off mine, right? Like of going and hammering at it, right? You know, or, you know, 4 by 8 minutes at threshold, right? It's not gonna induce that same kind of stress. So I think strength work in the long run is always good too. But
And
trying to always.
let's get back to that heart rate. So if I
Yeah.
go out for a training session and my heart rate's my maximum heart rate's 191. I know they got a champion heart rate.
I don't think I can get up.
And so it's going to be 90 degrees. I'm going to run at lunchtime,
Yeah.
and I've been hydrating beforehand because that's very important. But I'm going to go out and run for
with water and electrolytes, right?
water. You know, I missed the electrolytes, but I will be making sure I drink electrolytes. So drinking water, drinking electrolytes. I'm about to go out for an hour run, but I want to look at my heart rate, right? Now I typically run about an 8-minute mile pace. Walk me through what you would recommend for me to do during lunchtime. And it's temperature's 9 degrees and there's about 80-90% humidity because I live in Georgia and the side of the sun's on this side.
Absolutely, we're running on the sun.
Yeah.
So first off, yeah, definitely with kind of some hydration, especially as we sweat. Just I should talk about it beforehand. We want to make sure that we're not just putting water back in, right? If we're out there, we're sweating, we're losing a bunch of fluids, we're losing a lot of electrolytes, and we're just drinking water, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. You can go look up hyponatremia and see what happens and the downside of that. But we always want to make sure that we're replacing with electrolytes. And a well-formulated sports beverage, right, whether it's like a Gatorade Endurance, Infinite, Tailwind, there's a lot of great products out there that are designed for replacing, you know, what you're losing. So jumping back to the training. So first off, I would say if you were going to run a certain distance during your lunch break, you probably got some sort of time constraint, right?
Mm-hmm.
So drop distance and just say, hey, I've got 40 minutes to go run. Plan for 40 minutes, whether that's a 20-minute out or 20-minute back, or, you know, go run a loop that happens to whatever it turns out to be, right? Plan on time and use your heart rate to keep yourself in check. So if it is 95 degrees and 90% humidity, your heart rate is going to be higher, right? Now, one of the things that as you acclimate, your heart rate will come back down in the heat as you start to get used to it. But even when it's really hot like that, your heart rate's going to be elevated. There's no way to avoid it. So if it is supposed to be just an endurance run, right, it's just kind of those supporting miles that you like to do, you could easily go and run at that 8-minute pace. And at the end of the day, you come back, you load that up, and you spent, you know, 40 minutes at tempo, right? And so the benefits of, because your heart rate was so elevated from the heat, because you were so stuck in your head that I run 8-minute pace, so I'm going to go run 8-minute pace, right? So definitely looking at that heart rate, knowing and understanding your zones and kind of what the intent of the workout is and where you need to be, and then using that heart rate as a guide.
Awesome.
So I do as an athlete believe that RPE is the best thing, but we have to, you're going to go out and you're going to run, you know what an endurance effort feels like. And if it starts to feel hot, you feel that heat on your body, you feel that you're working harder, but having that, so you shouldn't know to slow down. Hey, I feel like I'm working too hard, I need to slow down. But sometimes our ego gets in the way and won't let us slow down. It won't let us back off, and having that heart rate as a guide to kind of say, hey, bud, like pat you on the back, tap you on the head, slap you in the face. You're working harder than you're supposed to. Let's bring it back down. And if that means that you've got to plan some walk breaks in there, you've got to take some walk breaks. You know, a lot of my athletes, they can go run for 40 minutes without stopping. Sure. Right. They can go run for 60 minutes without stopping, but that workout that you're doing at lunch, you've got to keep in mind the workout that you did before and the workout that you're doing after. Right. Because you don't live in this isolated bubble of just that one workout. So if taking a 30-second walk break every mile or every half mile allows you to keep your heart rate down in an appropriate, effort, complete that session, take care of yourself properly, then that's a good thing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice, man. Yeah, absolutely. And so let me ask this question. So I've just got through with my run, and now it's been 40 minutes. Come in, I come in from 95-degree weather. What's the first thing you want your athletes to do once they come into the house?
Yeah. So fluid and electrolytes
Hmm.
definitely are always my first thing. Depending on the intensity of the workout is gonna dictate whether, if a 40-minute aerobic run, I'm not really concerned with replenishing a lot of, potential carbohydrates that I lost, or, getting in good, some protein to kind of rebuild the muscles that I've broken down. My biggest concern is going to be rehydrating. So having some sort of a electrolyte beverage, whether it's like a scratch or whether it's some Gatorade Endurance or something to rehydrate. Um, and I'm a big fan of throwing some ice in it too, right? Getting it nice and cold. One, you just know it tastes so good after being outside in the heat, but it's right. But it's
Yeah.
but it's also going to cool your core down, right? It's going to cool you down from the inside. We've all been outside for that really hot run. You come back, man. All right, I'm in a hurry. I'm gonna go take a shower. You try and you take a shower that's not that hot, right? Because you're like, I can't take a hot shower. I'm gonna be sweating. Maybe the hot shower will cool me off. I gotta get ready for work. And then you get out of that hot shower or that cold shower even, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, I can't stop sweating, right? It's because your inside is still hot. And so your body is still working to cool itself off. So that's whether it's, some cold electrolyte drink or a cold recovery drink or smoothie or whatever it is, so that you start cooling yourself off from the inside too. And kind of
Ah,
kickstart that recovery process by bringing your temperature down.
yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah. Because I mean that happens to me all the time, especially at work. I have a gym right next to my office. Get in there, do a 40-minute, 50-minute hard run on the treadmill, feel great about myself, jump in the shower, take a cold shower, feel like, oh my God, I'm freezing. Then start putting my clothes on and then just cannot stop sweating. And I'm sitting in a meeting and people are like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'm fine. Why?
Meanwhile, they're like, why are your armpits so wet? And I think I smell you. Well, it's the same thing as like I love coffee in the morning, right? Especially before a morning run. But when it's this hot outside, I'll make a cup at night and then put it in the fridge, right? Because I don't want to have a hot cup of coffee before I go out and run early in the morning, because that hot cup of coffee, just like the cold drink after workout, is going to bring your core temperature down. That hot cup of coffee is going to bring your core temperature up a little bit, and that's the last thing you want before going outside to run when it's really hot outside.
Yeah, nice, nice. Those are great tips. Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, man,
Appreciate it. So I'm
absolutely.
gonna take your advice. Definitely cold fluids, electrolytes after their hard run because I'll sit here and like have to drip,
Yep.
sweat, especially with Zoom meetings and everything like that. I swear, people put me down for a 1 o'clock meeting all the time, and I'm thinking, yeah, how can I stop sweating right now?
You go like this. You just go like this. Hey guys, good to see.
Hey, so talk to me
So,
about the sweat test one more time. I hear people talk about the sweat test all the time, and I don't know what they're talking about, but for some people that don't know how to do a sweat test, explain to me what a sweat test is, and then how to do
so the sweat test, all you're trying to do is get an idea of how much fluid you've lost during the workout. Okay. Now the thing that can complicate a little bit is that when you lose water, you also lose carbohydrates. But generally speaking, we really can just look at it as just fluid. Okay. So let's say tomorrow I've got an hour bike. I'm going to, before I put on my kit, get on the scale and weigh myself. I'm going to go for my ride. I'm going to be out there an hour. It's hot. I'll be out there with a bottle of electrolyte drink, Gatorade Endurance, and I will probably drink that whole 22-ounce bottle, right? So we're not going to talk about how much that actually weighs, because by the time people probably go and try and do this, they're going to forget. So just go Google 22 ounces, right, or 750 ml or 500 ml, however much fluid you put in your bottle. Convert to pounds, right? You can get the math on the Google right there. So you're going to take your starting weight and how much fluid you consume, and then you're going to look at your ending weight. Okay. So to make numbers easy, let's say I start at 170 pounds and my ending weight is 165 pounds, but I consumed we'll call it 2 pounds of fluid to make all the numbers really easy. That means, so I lost 5 pounds, but I also added in 2 pounds of fluid. So that means net, my body actually lost 7 pounds. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So had I not consumed those 2 pounds of fluid, I actually my scale would have been down 7 pounds. So you can get, which would be a lot for making up numbers here. So you get an idea of how much fluid I've lost during that time. And then you can easily go and take that and say, hey, well, so the numbers tend to be 2% of body weight loss is where you start to see performance declination. So let's say, that same 170 pound athlete, 2% body weight would be 1.7, like 3.4, 3.5 pounds. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a calculator. Yeah, I'm just kidding. So basically you could say then, well, hey, I'm trying to minimize and make sure I don't dip below that 2.5 or that 3.5 pounds of body weight. So the 170 pound athlete is trying to, ideally, I want to finish an hour, a workout, and I want to be 166.5 or higher,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially for us as triathletes, the thing we've got to keep in mind too with the bike is that if you don't take care of yourself on the bike in an Ironman or even a half Ironman, you still got a half marathon or a full marathon to run.
Mm-hmm.
Those distances are hard enough in and of themselves, let alone starting them off in like a super dehydrated state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having an understanding of, okay, hey, I need to drink a bottle an hour or a bottle and a half an hour, or 2 bottles an hour and 48 ounces of fluid, which is a ton. But maybe, you have to have an idea of where you are so that you can try and come up with your strategy and practice that strategy in training. So weight before, weight after, what you consumed. You use those 3 points to kind of come up with what you lost. And that becomes the basis for how much fluid and how much electrolytes I need to try and consume on a per hour basis to minimize my losses.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. So, yeah. Do you know what your sweat rate is? I don't want to put you on.
Yeah, so I did, actually, it's funny. So ran 9 miles on Thursday, and it came out to a net of like 4 pounds per hour, like
Wow.
running, which is, it was super hot, super humid. I'm thick. So part of how much you sweat, right? Again, it's to keep your body cooler. Somebody who is very, very thin and leaner, their body doesn't have as much to cool off. Whereas somebody who's, has saw that coming, more muscle mass, your body is going to generate more heat, so it's going to have to sweat more and work harder to cool itself off. So I guess, so that's where, I think it was in 71 minutes, I lost 4.75 pounds of fluid net. And so that's where, for me, I have to keep in mind that if I'm running in, when it's 90 degrees and 98% humidity and, a 78 dew point or just stupid conditions, your performance is just going to be limited. There's nothing you can do about it except for continue to train and try and get stronger. Because one of the other things is fitter athletes are going to be able to cope with the heat better than less fit athletes. It just comes with territory. So there are people that will spend kind of an exorbitant amount of time trying to go through all these heat acclimation protocols, going and sitting extra time in the sauna or whatever it is. Well, if they're going to go and sit, 30 minutes in the sauna, 6 days a week, if they have the capacity physically to train an extra 30 minutes a day, right? The potential fitness gains, whether it's just extra aerobic, that's an extra 3 hours of training a week. If we can do that, there's potentially more physical adaptations that they could gain in terms of building their fitness that could also help them cope with the heat. So,
yeah, That makes sense. I've heard about the sauna thing, but like you said, I'd rather spend 30 minutes outside running in 95-degree weather if I have the capacity than sitting in a sauna with a bunch of naked dudes.
And well, I mean, so it is interesting because there are a couple different studies out there that talk about right sauna protocols versus actually exercising in the heat, and show that time in the sauna in that hot environment, like the oh gosh, whatever, I guess the same kind of responses that you'll get from training in the heat, you can get from sitting in the sauna. But if you can do both as part of your kind of acclimation protocol, it's gonna be even better in terms of adapting.
Awesome.
You go sit in your sauna.
Hey, look, I've been in the LA Fitness sauna. I really think that's where all diseases start, man. This is the nastiest. The only reason I ever use the sauna is I walk in there to dry off from the pool. I use it for 30 seconds and I'm like, okay, now I'm dry. I'm not wet anymore. Time to go like shower or whatever. So yeah. Awesome, man. So yeah, dude, those are some great tips, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. So I'll take your advice and go ahead.
No, go ahead. It broke up.
I said I'm gonna take your advice and try out some of those on Monday. So
you can get a cooling towel too that you can just get wet and just wrap around your neck too. Those things, I mean, they're like $10 or $15. I mean, they're well worth their weight in gold. I mean, they can make a real big difference. I think unfortunately, sorry, as you know, I mean, my answers are never short, right? But hopefully there's some stuff in there that might help out a little bit.
I will tell you this, and my wife hates me when I say this, is that there's one thing that you didn't cover that I use to beat the heat, is that whenever, I learned this a long time ago, whenever you're hot, just think cool thoughts. It will work every time. Yes. So you just tell yourself cool.
Well, you are onto something in that, right? Like, I'm gonna go down to the rabbit hole real quick. Sorry. part of the training and acclimating to the heat is the mental kind of capacity to withstand that heat, right? Like the more you do it, yes, your body adapts, but also your kind of mental ability to cope with that and know, hey, I'm okay. I can do this. I can keep pushing in this, right? Like part of it is in your mind too, right? Like your brain, right, has mechanisms to try and keep you alive, and it's going to try and shut you down earlier than your body is potentially ready to shut down, but that's for a good thing, right? Because we don't want to cross that line. But right, people can go spend some time reading on central governor theory. It's super neat, and it's just the thought that when you start getting to that point, like I can't run anymore, I don't have any more in me. You probably still have more, but listen to your body though, because I don't want you to go run and die.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
But yeah, I mean that's part of it, is just that mental kind of acclimation to the heat for sure. It's huge. So yeah, any cool thoughts, baby?
Yeah, dude. That's what I do every time I'm out there. I'm like, oh God, it's hot. Oh, I feel good. I feel good.
Like, oh, the cool breeze feels so good.
She's like, shut up. It's 95 degrees. It's 100 degrees outside. It is hot. Okay. She's like, I can say it's hot.
When y'all are running together, you try and say that?
Yeah. That goes back to that. We should probably, she just wants me to shut up at that point. So, well, hey, man, thanks for the tips. Appreciate it.
Yeah, bud.
Yeah. All right, we'll check in again another time. So
yeah, and something we're talking about, if people have questions on any random topic, whether it's bike gearing, running shoes, whatever kind of questions that they maybe have that hey, I don't want to ask somebody this out loud because I might feel stupid to ask it or whatever it is. We've all been there and had those kind of questions, but definitely I think we're talking about having them shoot you a message, right? Whether through YouTube or on Facebook, and maybe kind of peg you with some different questions, and it can kind of direct us for some things where you maybe talk about some stuff and help people out.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, this helped me right now because, like, I've been doing this for 10, 15 years, and I'm at this point where now I don't ask dumb questions, try not to ask dumb questions. So I always act like I already know the answer, but you just kind of helped me with the sweat test. So I mean, I knew
Yeah,
I
man.
knew how to do a sweat test, but I didn't know like the ins and outs of a sweat test. So yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate
It's simple. Yeah,
it. Yeah.
man.
You
Awesome.
know what? Honestly, triathlon is simple. It's just finding the right answers. You know?
There's a lot to that.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
once you have the answer, you're like, oh, I should have known that all along. That makes complete sense, you know?
Well, and I think people they want there to be a complicated answer,
Yeah.
right? But most of the answers in general are very simple.
Yeah. You just have to be able to ask the right question. So, yeah. Well, hey, man,
Sure.
thanks.
Yeah,
You
brother.
enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy 4th of
Yeah,
July.
man.
Appreciate checking in on me. And we will talk soon, man.
Good seeing you as always.
All right, dude. All right, bye.
All right, brother. Be good.
You too.